Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and drop a comment if you think you can handle the darkest FBI cases, because what happens next is not for the faint of heart. It was a humid June evening in 2019 when Emily Parker, a 14-year-old with bright eyes and a laugh that could light up a room, left her home in Milltown, Pennsylvania. She had told her mother she was just heading to meet a friend at the local park. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks, and by the time Emily's mother noticed she hadn't returned, the night had swallowed the streets in an unsettling quiet. At first, the town thought she was hiding, maybe sulking, typical teenage rebellion. But hours stretched into a day, and panic seeped into every corner of Milltown. By midnight, the police were called, and the first urgent searches began. Patrol cars swept the neighborhood, flashlights slicing through the dark, searching every alley, every abandoned lot. Dogs barked, tracing scents that led nowhere. Detective Laura Simmons, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades on the force, took the lead. She had seen missing persons cases before, but there was something about Emily's disappearance that gnawed at her instincts. The girl's room was untouched, her phone and wallet were at home, and her friend's testimony was shaky at best. Something didn't add up. Meanwhile, the Parker family sat in their living room, illuminated by the cold blue glow of police laptop screens. Emily's father, a wiry man with lines carved deep by stress, stared at the ceiling, shaking his head. "She wouldn't just disappear. Not like this," he whispered. Her mother clutched a framed photo of Emily at her last birthday, her fingers trembling. Every second that passed felt like a lifetime, and every unanswered call from the police gnawed at them. By the 3rd day, the case had escalated. News vans lined the streets, reporters whispering about the missing girl from Milltown. The town that once felt safe now thrummed with fear. Detective Simmons discovered Emily's backpack dumped near a creek behind the park, waterlogged, its contents scattered, a notebook, a pencil, and a small charm bracelet, but no signs of struggle, no footprints, nothing that could point to the abductor. Weeks turned into months, leads dried up, sightings proved false, and the case grew cold. But the FBI had taken notice, labeling it as a high-priority case given the mysterious circumstances and the potential danger to Emily. They brought in a cold case team, experts in profiling and forensic evidence, scouring every shred of information. Then, 5 years later, a breakthrough came, not from a witness, not from surveillance, but from something far smaller, a single hair fragment found during an initial search that had been set aside in evidence. At the time, it seemed insignificant, but now, with advances in DNA analysis, it was about to rewrite the entire story. Detective Simmons leaned over the microscope, her heart racing. The hair wasn't just a clue, it was the thread that could unravel the entire mystery. But she knew one thing: what they were about to discover would shock even the most experienced investigators. The truth, she feared, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. And then, when the FBI team opened the envelope containing the latest DNA report, the name it revealed made every stomach in the room drop. It wasn't just a suspect, it was someone close to Emily's life, someone nobody had ever suspected. But when they cross-checked the last location Emily was seen and the suspect's whereabouts, the chilling connection became undeniable. What they found next would change everything. The revelation of the suspect's name sent shockwaves through the FBI's cold case unit. He wasn't a stranger, a transient, or a random criminal. They knew him. A local handyman, Michael Hayes, who had lived in Milltown for years and had been friendly with Emily's family. His clean-cut demeanor, polite smile, and helpful nature had made him almost invisible as a threat. But now, DNA told a story he could no longer deny. Detective Simmons and her team moved fast. They tracked Hayes' movements over the last 5 years, piecing together receipts, phone records, and witness accounts. It became clear he had carefully covered his tracks, avoiding cameras and staying off digital grids. But there were gaps. 5 years of hidden life, and the FBI investigators knew the tiniest mistake could unravel him. Then came the chilling discovery. Emily's charm bracelet, the one found near the creek in 2019, had matching fibers embedded in Hayes' workshop rug. Forensic analysts confirmed the fibers were from Emily's clothing, a connection that tied her to the suspect far more concretely than any witness testimony could. Interviews with neighbors painted a picture that was both mundane and terrifying. Hayes had always been quiet, helpful with yard work and odd jobs, yet one neighbor recalled seeing a suspicious vehicle parked near the park the night Emily disappeared, a van with no license plate, the same van Hayes had recently sold under a fake name. Detective Simmons felt the weight of every overlooked detail, every casual observation that now screamed of premeditation. With mounting evidence, the FBI prepared a covert operation to collect a fresh DNA sample. Hayes, unsuspecting, frequented a local coffee shop every morning. Agents discreetly retrieved a cup he had discarded. Laboratory analysis returned a perfect match to the hair fragment, finally confirming what they had feared. Hayes had Emily in his custody, or worse, had been responsible for her death. As the team prepared to make their move, tension mounted. Every step was dangerous. Hayes was cunning, resourceful, and aware that the FBI was closing in. They had to act swiftly or risk him disappearing or destroying crucial evidence. Surveillance intensified. Every phone call, every errand, every interaction he made was meticulously monitored.
Then, the unthinkable happened. Hayes disappeared. The house he had lived in for years was empty, stripped of personal belongings. Windows open, drawers cleared, evidence meticulously scrubbed. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Panic gripped the team. Emily's fate now depended not only on evidence, but on catching Hayes before he could slip through their fingers completely. Hours later, a break came from an unexpected angle. A local hiker reported seeing a concealed cabin deep in the woods outside town. The cabin was small, weathered, and nearly invisible from the road. Agents approached cautiously, their hearts pounding, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every step in the forest felt like stepping into a trap. When they finally reached the cabin door, they found signs of recent habitation, footprints, food wrappers, and a makeshift bed. Then, in the corner, partially hidden under a tarp, they saw a small box labeled with Emily's name. Inside were personal items, some familiar, some horrifyingly altered. It was a clue that Emily had been there, but where was she now? And why had Hayes left the cabin so suddenly? The walls of the investigation were closing in, but the deeper the FBI delved, the darker the truth became. Someone had helped Hayes, someone who knew the town, who could mislead every search effort. Betrayal ran closer than anyone suspected. And just when the team thought they had narrowed down the location, they discovered something that made every hair on their neck stand on end. A second DNA profile, hidden in the cabin. It wasn't Hayes. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who had been living in the shadows all along. The case had just become far more dangerous and far more personal than anyone had imagined. The FBI's cold case unit was now operating on two fronts: locating Michael Hayes, the primary suspect, and uncovering the identity behind the second DNA profile discovered in the hidden cabin. Time was against them. Every hour Hayes remained free increased the risk of Emily being harmed or the trail going cold again. Detective Simmons focused on the DNA lead. Forensic genealogists traced the second profile to an individual who had lived in Milltown for years. Under the radar, a man named Thomas Vance. His criminal record was minimal, but his ties to the town ran deep. He had worked in construction, knew the forest trails intimately, and had been seen in proximity to Emily on several occasions before her disappearance. Simultaneously, the search for Hayes intensified. Phone triangulations, vehicle sightings, and even drone surveillance were used to comb the surrounding counties. Hayes was smart, but desperation was making him reckless. He left a trail, a discarded water bottle here, footprints there, each piece of evidence inching the FBI closer to him. Finally, a breakthrough came when a local camper spotted Hayes near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a neighboring town. Federal agents swarmed the location under cover of darkness. Hayes, realizing the net was closing in, attempted to flee, but he was cornered. There was no dramatic shootout, no chase through the streets, just the quiet, relentless precision of trained agents who had studied him for months. Hayes was in custody. With Hayes detained, the focus shifted to uncovering Emily's fate. Under interrogation, Hayes' story began to unravel. He had abducted Emily the night she disappeared, kept her in isolation for weeks, and then, driven by paranoia and the fear of capture, abandoned her in a hidden location. But he wasn't working alone. Thomas Vance had provided logistical support, knowledge of secluded areas, and means to avoid detection. The partnership between Hayes and Vance had been quiet, almost invisible, until the DNA finally revealed the connection. Emily's recovery was both miraculous and harrowing. She had survived in a concealed underground space, malnourished and traumatized, but alive. Her reunion with her family was a mixture of tears, relief, and disbelief. 5 years of searching, endless nights of hope, all culminating in a single, devastating moment of survival against unimaginable odds. The trial that followed was intense. Hayes faced multiple charges, including kidnapping, unlawful confinement, and obstruction of justice. Vance, implicated through DNA and evidence collected in the cabin, faced accessory charges and conspiracy. Both men received sentences that reflected the severity of their crimes, but the case left a lasting scar on Milltown and the nation. For Detective Simmons and the FBI, the case became a landmark example of modern forensic science in action. The combination of DNA analysis, genealogical tracing, and traditional investigative work had solved what was once thought unsolvable. It was hailed as one of the hardest kidnapping cases ever cracked, not just because of the complexity of the abduction, but because of the human cunning and deception involved. Yet, even as the courtroom emptied, a haunting thought lingered. Hayes and Vance were behind bars, but the shadows they left behind, the trust broken, the fear sown, and the trauma endured, would remain forever. Emily survived, but the scars of those 5 years were etched into her life and the fabric of the town that had nearly lost her. And as Detective Simmons closed the file, a note slipped out from the evidence binder, unsigned, with only a chilling message. "You caught us this time, but others are still watching." The hardest kidnapping case was closed, but the story of danger, deception, and survival would echo far beyond Milltown.